Well, thanks for coming again tonight. And last week we weren't on Zoom, we were in person at the church only watching the video. Hannah was here, John was here, Camille was here, and hopefully the rest of you got to watch the video. Any interesting learnings? It was completely packed, and I do not expect that you remember even half of what he said in the video. But what's if you watched it, if you and you'd be willing to share one thing that you found interesting as we went through the whole Jewish history, 4,000 years of Jewish history in an hour and 10 minutes.
500-year segments.
Yes.
Yeah.
That just naming that 500-year segments is one of the things he said was there's a major shift in Judaism about every 500 years. And that's also true in Christianity, that there's a major shift in Christianity as well. And it's been a little more than 500 years since the Protestant Reformation, which was probably our last very major shift. So likely we are in the midst of a shift, probably maybe as big as the Reformation was for the Christian church. And we get to live in the midst of that.
I thought it was really well done. I mean, he knew his stuff.
Yeah,
that's for sure. And I think I said this it's just interesting how everything colors from your perspective. So I never heard kind of a Jewish history perspective, like from their view, really. Yeah. All the way through like that. And it just depends. Like if you were Muslim, you'd focus more on the Muhammad part. If you, so this was actually really interesting. I wrote down a lot of words. Bit Rishon.
Yeah. With covenant.
Yes.
Covenant is so important.
Yep. Somewhat universal.
So the Bible moves forward. It's important in Judaism, it's important in Christianity. But the Bible is really advanced based on the covenants.
It was kind of interesting to look at the participants' faces. Some of them were really interested. Some of them were just totally zoned out. And some of them were overwhelmed, I think, because there was so much information, and he was running back and forth so many times, so much energy.
To be fair, it was also being presented in English to a German audience. And some of them were wearing translation headsets. So there's a bit of a delay. And there may have also
delay.
I noticed he worked in German words. Yeah.
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 And German is an important theological language as well. So if you're studying theology, it's good to know, learn Hebrew, learn Greek, learn German. There's a lot of theology written in German. Well, let's, so we last week or at your leisure, as you had time, watched kind of the culture, this history of Judaism over 4,000 years. And so we talked about kind of the history. So I want us to take a step into the concept of the body and mind in Mesopotamia. And so looking at ancient Mesopotamia, the body itself, because some of the words we're going to start looking at, we're going to get into words like heart, soul, to listen, things that have an impact on our bodies or relate with body parts. And so we're going to learn a little bit about the body, and then as we jump into that. Welcome, John.
Hi. How's it going?
What's going on? Yeah, you want to move the iPad so John's in it too?
Yes.
You can just move it back, probably. Yeah. Then everybody's in.
Is that good?
Maybe a little further back.
Yeah. I don't know where I'm
Might need to be all the way back by the TV, by the wall even. So let's start talking about today, just thinking about today, what is it that causes disease? Our cultural understanding and scientific understanding. What causes disease and illnesses?
Bacteria, viruses.
Viruses, no.
Bacteria, virus, germs.
Corrupting of chromosomes
Mhm.
somehow.
Yep. Chromosomal abnormalities.
Cancers and stuff like that, yeah.
Yeah,
Cancers. Yeah.
still kind of mysterious a little bit.
Yeah. There's.
What causes disease?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
What
in-
causes disease?
Well, things that
Lifestyle.
don't agree with the body is like, those are all the same things, but they're things that don't work well with our bodies.
What about our lifestyle?
Yeah.
Well, that would be something that wouldn't work along with our bodies.
Yeah, the environment. Yep.
environment.
Yeah. Environmental impacts where there's higher rates of certain disease in high pollution areas. So
Stress.
stress. Yep. So we've got, this is our concept of what causes illnesses and diseases, and we're going to walk back in time now. You're probably most familiar as you walk back in time into like ancient Greek understanding with understanding like the Hippocratic system, where there's the understanding that illnesses were caused by an imbalance of the body humors. So there were 4 different body humors. You had blood, yellow bile, black bile, and phlegm. And when they got out of balance, you got sick. And so you needed to have those things be in balance. But also part of that Hippocratic system was that there was a holistic view and mental and physical health were integrated with one another. So some types of treatments that they would look at were preventative treatments like physical therapy or physical activity, making sure participating in the Olympics, having things that were being physically active and having good nutrition. That was something that they were aware of and were emphasizing in people's lives. And it was emphasized that physical activity and nutrition impacts the physical health, but also the mental health, both of those things. That was understood because other types of therapies that they had in ancient Greek culture was art therapy. They would use drama and music and assign that as something that would be a tool for treating illnesses, was to go do drama and use music for that.
So
What
for bad nutrition, if they didn't have like Lay's potato chips and everything was natural,
What were they
what
eating?
were they eating that was so
Maybe
bad?
too much fatty meat.
Yeah.
Oh, you think they were concerned about that? Oh.
No, they probably barely got enough.
Or an imbalance of food.
So, okay.
Not enough.
Not enough nutrients.
Yeah, I guess if you
No,
know
not
Eating
enough
was-
fruits and vegetables or
yeah.
Eating too many figs.
Too many
Yep.
figs and not enough.
No,
and
a lot of
big
olives.
only diet would be an issue.
That's a good
Okay.
question. That was a good question.
So, but they were pretty holistic, mind and body together, but they did have specialists. So there would be specialists that were looking at different body parts or specialized in different areas. So we know quite a bit about the Hippocratic system because it impacts our understanding of medicine now too. But something that's interesting is that we actually have more original source material regarding medical texts, like original medical source material from ancient Mesopotamia than we do from Greece or Rome. Which seems weird, but the reason why is because Mesopotamia was using cuneiform. So they took clay, it was baked clay, and that preserves a lot better than papyrus, which was what was being written on in Greek and Roman cultures. The paper would wear away. So we have a lot of information, but it's not original source material. Whereas when we're looking at Mesopotamian medical texts, we're actually looking at the original material.
So you're
That's
talking
been
like
collected.
pre-Babylonian day times?
Pre-Babylonian times. Yeah. So from about 200 BC, 2000
Yeah.
BCE, sorry. So 2000 BCE is what we found of the oldest medical records from Mesopotamia.
Wow.
And so we have evidence that healers had started doing medical records as early as 2000 BCE.
Wow.
And that there's the British Museum has over 1,000 cuneiform tablets just from one library, from the Assyrian library of Ashurbanipal. His library, he was a Neo-Assyrian king from about 668 to 627 BCE. And he sent people all over the world. He wanted to acquire knowledge and build a library. And he sent specialists to go gather medical texts and bring them back, and then created an encyclopedia of medical, which was one of the first medical encyclopedias, and put it in his library. And it's still being translated because not a lot of people can read cuneiform.
Yeah.
And it was also shattered. So they have fragments that they're still trying to put back together. And if cuneiform, if you remember, we talked about it a little in years past, but it's, you have the wet clay before it's been fired, and you take basically a stick that has a triangle at the end, and you push it in at different angles, and that's what creates the letters. So that's what it looks like all the way across in lines, and imagine that being shattered and needing to piece all of those different triangles back together. So if you're interested,
it would be fun someday if we could make those, even if it were, just to see what it was like.
Write your name or something.
Yeah, that would be fun. We should do that.
Because how does it just dry on its own, or did they
would usually bake it.
They did bake it.
To bake it
okay.
afterwards to
They didn't
harden
just
it.
put it in the sun.
Yeah, and keep it for long.
Right.
Kind of like doing pottery.
Mhm.
You would use a pottery oven and bake it. So of those, like 1,000 cuneiform tablets that the British Museum has from Ashurbanipal's library, 660 of them are medical texts.
Huh.
And so there's actually quite a bit of medical texts that were being written back in this time period in this area that we're reading about in the Bible. And Ashurbanipal is mentioned one place in the Bible, Ezra chapter 4, verse 10. In some translations, he's called Osnappar, Osnappar. So, but that's where he's mentioned. So what does it say in these texts?
Yeah.
So we've got these texts. We don't know all of it because they're still putting some of it together and trying to understand, because there's only about a handful of people who actually can read cuneiform.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder how many letters,
Right.
shapes they had.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
But one thing that we know is in Sumerian, there are not separate words for mind and body. There's one word to mean both mind and body. So you don't have two different words. So just like when we talked about the ancient Greek understanding where there was an integration of mind and body, a holistic view, in ancient Mesopotamia, it's fully integrated. There's no distinction. There's not even a word to distinguish between that mind and body. And Sumerian died out as a spoken language, but in this area, it was used as a scientific language. So it's kind of like when we read about Latin, read things in Latin. When people would read it in Sumerian, they were reading like the equivalent of what Latin would be. So we've got these scientific texts we're reading through, and from them we've learned their understanding of illnesses in ancient Mesopotamia in the body is that body parts could malfunction on their own. So sometimes things just happen. Your body just doesn't work right. Like one phrase says a person could have his head seize him, like maybe got a headache. The head itself just seized the body, and that created an illness and had a headache. Disease could also be the consequence of interactions with the outside world, especially from external agents such as gods, demons, ghosts. So another way it's understood, like a ghost could cause his head to seize him. So maybe somebody got a headache and they understood it was the ghost in this place that caused my head to seize me. So an example is take concept of cleanliness, simple thing like washing our hands. We know about washing our hands and the importance of that. Mesopotamians knew about washing their hands and the importance, but for very different reasons. They didn't know about germs, but from an ancient Mesopotamian text, we have this sentence. He should not enter a lavatory, or sulak, the lavatory demon will strike him. If he rubs his eyes with his unwashed hands, as long as he lives, his eyes will be sore. So if you go to the bathroom, Salak, the lavatory god, is going to strike you if you don't wash your hands. And if you touch your eyes afterwards, you will get an illness in your eyes that will cause your eyes to hurt for the rest of your life. But Salak, there's this lavatory, this bathroom demon. Salak, the word, literally means hands not clean, is what it means. So the demon is called hands not clean. And that is what would strike them. So if you cleaned your hands, the understanding was then you had a protective spirit. Just by cleaning yourself, it created a protective spirit, would protect you from the demons that were outside of you that caused illness. So that's one way I was thinking about how we understand it. Basically, if you think of germs were called demons.
Yeah.
And they were understood differently.
Sick that way.
And if you clean your hands or keep your house clean, there was a ritual that you'd regularly sweep your house out with palm leaves, make sure your house was always clean. Cleanliness was really important to these cultures. The thing that they didn't understand fully was you'd swept it out of your house and then it just went in the public streets and then everybody walked through the public streets.
Yeah.
And you got sick anyways.
Yeah.
But they were getting there. So you had these outside spirits. And then another way you could get sick is being in physical contact with an afflicting spirit and its victim. So if someone else is being plagued by a god or a demon, then if you are in physical contact with them, it could cause you to also have that issue as well. Which is, so like you hear in the Bible, they talk some about like isolating or wanting like lepers to be in a certain place, away. It wasn't necessarily an understanding of germs, but in kind of an understanding that sometimes some physical illnesses were caused by God being mad at you. And if you became in physical contact with them, you also would get sick because the afflicting spirit would make you ill as well. So they sort of understood that things were contagious then, just for different reasons why it was contagious.
Well, that would be kind of like a shunning.
But it was a public health
right. But if they were demons and all these things that got into you, weren't there people that thought there were reasons that the demons were able to get into you, so that so that there was a positive and negative to this, so that we do not think of being sick as being something negative, but there they may have thought you've done something wrong.
Right. So both good fortune and misfortune were based on your relationship with your personal God.
Yeah.
Part of understanding illnesses. And we see that in Deuteronomy. We see that playing out in the understanding of God itself, where if whenever bad people do bad things, then bad things happen to them. when they do good things, then good things happen to them. That's kind of one of the premises of Deuteronomy, as they're struggling with what God is and how God interacts with them. They think whenever something goes wrong, that they did something where they sinned. And so they're always looking for where they sinned. So that's how they were viewing illnesses. And we're looking at illnesses because it's a good way to understand how a culture views the body when you look at how the culture views the body when it's sick.
Gretchen, if they recovered, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm pushing this a little bit. If you were sick and there was a feeling that they were demons or something that you may have caused it, and then you recovered, are you then more powerful because you were able to overcome the demons? Or is there any recognition for somebody that recovers? And then is it okay for those people to be around you when you recovered?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about recovery. So we understand what it meant to be sick. Now, medical care was important too. And it was an important part of the culture because you don't want people to be sick. And they didn't want people to be sick. And it wasn't a long term. You could be made clean again. You could be brought back into the community again. And so medical care involved kind of three main stages. The first was identifying the agent causing the illness. So that could have been a god, it could have been a demon, it could have been a ghost, it could have been just a bodily malfunction. It could have been a poor diet. It could have been lack of exercise, but you'd have people that would help you figure out what was causing that illness.
Okay.
Then the second step was choosing the appropriate ritual to pacify that agent. So if it was a god, a demon, a ghost, you figure out the right ritual to help with that. And the third, and parallel with that last one, is administering pharmaceutical therapies as well. So they would attach a ritual, but then also there's prescriptions for medications that we have written in cuneiform. Most of them are plant-based, either sometimes salves for skin diseases or internally ingesting certain things. And then we've got so much documentation that they had case studies where they would document, well, this person got better with this, or this didn't work, or this person will never walk again, or this person will get better, or this person's going to die. And they would kind of follow those case studies and write about it for other physicians. So to identify that cure, stage one, to identifying the agent causing the illness, you would go to the temple because that's where the physician was. Because these things were connected with each other, being ill and gods and demons and ghosts, they might be connected. So there were two types of physicians. You would go to a physician who were priests or exorcists, and there were also ones who were more pharmacists that you would go to, and they often worked hand in hand. And
was the pharmacist somebody that gave drugs like it is now?
Yep, they'd make drugs out of local plants and other items. Beer and wine is in a lot of prescriptions. Mix it with beer and wine so it goes down, or honey or things like that.
Way better than the water.
Yeah. Yeah. Some of the water wasn't very good. Some of them, they did have really good water in some places. Where they would dig wells down and actually had cleaner than London in the 1800s had cleaner water. So in physicians, because anybody who worked in a temple, being clean, ritually clean, having yourself washed from head to toe basically was so important. Cleanliness and sanitization was a part of medical practices at this time. Like for sure, that physician would have clean hands when they were working with you. Just because that was a part of the rituals you would do. They would often do house calls as well. That was really common. So we're connecting these rituals, we're connecting these just other things that bodily malfunctions, the drugs, all together to heal diseases. So any questions on kind of how ancient Mesopotamia, which lines us up with many of the scriptures in the Bible, how they understood body.
Interesting ideas.
What?
There's a book, if anybody's interested in reading more about this. It's called Diagnosis in Assyrian and Babylonian Medicine. It's by Sherlock, Scurlock, and Anderson. It's published in 2005. And it's an interesting book. You can get it on Kindle for $10. If you buy a hardcover book on Amazon, you're going to be paying closer to $180.
What?
So I know it must be out of
Might
print.
be through ILL somewhere.
So maybe or talk with Hannah at the
Yeah,
library.
see if we can find it.
And if we all put requests in, maybe we can get it.
Yes, there you go.
Gretchen, what other civilizations are they progressing? Does everybody kind of progress along the same tracks with respect to diseases? Like where every people had to have the same situations with people kind of having the same disease reactions. So does this happen kind of at the same time, like in China and in like the Vikings or in the Mideast?
It would depend how much trade there is, as far as like
No, but I
medical
mean without trade, just that they just by living there, they would experience the same kinds of, they'd have disease.
Right.
May not be the same disease, but they'd have to do it. Was medicine evolving at the same pace, or does it evolve faster at some places than others?
I would say it's evolving faster in places probably with denser populations and more resources.
Yeah.
Okay,
Whereas places
that
where
makes
people
sense.
are separated, you don't have the resources, nor do you have the experience with as many diseases, because
Okay.
you just don't see as many people.
I'm wondering what if mind and body are the same or whatever. What did they think of the mind? What the thinking? I mean, they knew brain. Did they know what a brain was?
So
I mean, obviously they dissect. I mean, they knew it was there.
so they didn't really
What did they
have
understand the mind was?
the mind was, and we're gonna see this
From
in
the stomach or whatever.
in the video if
Yeah.
we get to it tonight, or we'll do it next week. The mind was understood. It was like there they did dissections,
Right.
and so they knew there was something in your skull, but they
Yeah.
thought that thought process came from the heart.
So they just thought this was something.
This is something, but it's
So
actually
you would
the
take
heart
care of your heart the most.
that you take decisions
Yeah.
from.
I think that's what the
Emotions
Greeks
come from
thought,
your
right?
heart.
Okay.
Everything that is the core of who you are comes
I
from
wonder
your
what they
heart.
thought the brain was.
I don't know.
Just a mass
Maybe they
tissue.
didn't think the brain was.
You could
Where was
Probably
the
not.
soul? Where was the
Big
soul?
filler.
Where did the soul was in your body? Where was the soul, placed? Was that in your brain?
I don't know that there's a specific place for it. And it kind of depends what type of culture we're talking about.
Oh, okay.
Because we're a little more general right now. So we're looking more at general Mesopotamian, and then it's influenced by Assyrian, and then would have influenced some Babylonian, because that's where we have the texts from. Which also makes your other question harder to answer, Toby, because there's some parts of the world where we just don't have records, because
Right,
either they
yeah.
didn't have records, or they wrote it on things that would decompose, and so we don't have those records.
Well,
So
it is confusing, or not confusing, but you want to know what they really thought,
yeah.
Go back in time.
I recommend the book Diagnoses in Assyrian and Babylonian Medicine.
Do you? Have you read?
I
Medical
read
history is
parts
so
of it.
interesting.
It
Even
was
like with Lewis and
fascinating.
Clark times, what they did
They
for medical things.
they have little snippets from Sumerian cuneiform written
Mhm.
out, and then explain parts of it, so it's a good way to read.
Oh, were they already bloodletting? Was that
And
that became pretty popular?
I
at
don't
some
know.
point,
I would
as a way to let the poison out.
I spent more time
From
reading about
diseases.
public health.
Oh, okay.
That was really interesting.
Okay.
What was the name of the book? What was the name of Diagnosis and what?
In Assyrian and Babylonian medicine.
Thanks.
Yep. It was a pretty clear read, not so academic that you can't get past page 1, which some.
Yeah.
So keep all that info in mind, and in body, I suppose. Because it's kind of like in the back of your head, and then we're gonna move forward into a few different words. We're gonna use the Shema, which is a very important Jewish prayer, and we're gonna go through key words in the opening of the Shema, and that's going to be our word study for the next few weeks until Advent that we're going to walk through. So, does anybody know the Shema or where it comes from in the Bible?
Not anymore.
So, if you want to open to Deuteronomy chapter 6. Chapter 6. Verses 4 and 5.
Oh, it's all here. Oh,
And you're going to recognize this one.
Yes.
I pretty much guarantee it. This is the most popular prayer. And well, it's made into a prayer. It doesn't originally start as a prayer in here. So Moses is telling this line to the people.
6 verses 4 and 5.
Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4 and 5. And it goes, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might." Anybody else want to read their translations?
and 4, 5, and
4 and 5.
oh yeah, mine can be. I can do mine. Hear, O Israel, Yahweh our God, Yahweh is one. You are to love Yahweh your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength.
Mine is similar too. It says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength."
Mine is just like what you read, Gretchen. It's identical. Mhm.
Mine's the same.
So I'm gonna read it again, and I'm gonna read it with the Hebrew word of the night. Shema, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. So this first word, it's called the Shema because the Shema is the first word of the prayer, and it's the first word here in Deuteronomy chapter 4, 6.
Here.
And Shema means hear, to listen, and it also means to get someone's attention, and to pay attention and to respond. It means a lot, all in this one word, Shema. And Shema at the end has an interesting Hebrew sound that we don't have in English, and so sometimes we struggle to say it. But it's like if you say the word, say the word orange. Just everybody say the word orange.
Orange.
Now notice as you say the word orange again that you kind of close your throat so that you can push the rest of the word out.
Orange.
Orange.
That allows you to push the sound out. And it's the guttural stop is what you're doing. And that guttural stop is a Hebrew sound, a sound in Hebrew. And that's how Shema ends, so it has like almost a cut off ending when you say it. Shema. So you do
Shema.
like a
How do you spell that,
Uh,
Gretchen?
the
It's not,
Shema.
what is it?
Shema.
Shema.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Shema.
So let's, any thoughts on this opening? Hear, O Israel, Shema, O Israel, what that means to you? This opening line is so important. The whole prayer is named after it.
Oh, yeah. That's right.
Wasn't it telling him what's coming is going to be so important that you have to pay attention?
Yeah, absolutely. So that pay attention. It's something that would grab your attention in your full attention. That's a part of what Shema means.
Like a sort of compassionate listening to your heart and your mind
Yeah,
and your. It reminds me a little bit of the Benedictine listen with the ear of your heart. It's more than just listening. It's a full attentive, full body, holistic listening.
absolutely. Especially remembering, pulling back out what we just learned about the mind and body. There's no distinction. So when you're listening, you are to listen with your mind, your body, and your heart, that you're listening with everything that you are. And there's not a distinction between that.
And no one is more important, right?
What do you mean by that?
That mind, body, and heart.
Right, they're integrated with one another.
So
Yeah.
that they just push them all together. How do you
Yeah.
do that?
There's not a way, well, in like, as far as scientifically looking at the health of the body and the mind, there's not a way to separate it, which we are starting to move towards that, I would say, in our own.
Oh yeah.
When you think about mental health, as the more and more we learn about mental health illnesses, the more and more we're learning that so much of it is actually biological, and that maybe we're treating it incorrectly and we should be treating it a little differently, and have been moving in different directions with that. That the way your chemical makeup in your mind impacts your thoughts, and vice versa. And your thoughts impact the chemical makeup in your body as well.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm gonna get stuck on this. What is the definition of heart? It's not just an organ, right? It's more than that.
It's more than that.
It was.
Yep.
The thinking part.
We are going to do an entire night on the heart.
Oh.
The word for
Yeah.
heart is lev, L-E-V, and we're going to have an entire night on that. So,
Because just thinking of it as an organ, it wouldn't fit. It's just something that beats.
so it's an organ, but it's more than that.
Okay,
Yeah.
because this is just something that beats to move the blood.
Right. Here's another place Shema is written. So this is in Proverbs chapter 20, verse 12. The Shema ear and the seeing eye, the Lord has made them both. Probably others have other translations.
Where were you at, Gretchen?
Proverbs chapter 20,
Oh, 20.
verse 12.
I have ears that hear and eyes that see. The Lord has made them both.
So with Shema in there, it would be ears that Shema and eyes that see. The Lord has made them both. So this is kind of similar to how we would understand like ears that listen. Ears
Yeah.
can physically listen to something. But if we jump back to Genesis 30. So Genesis 30 is the story of Rachel and Leah, Jacob's wives, and having children and their difficulties having children or as they have children.
Yeah.
And if you remember the story, Rachel was Jacob's favorite wife. And Leah, he never did love her, it seems. And she always was trying to seek out his love. And so she was hoping if she had children, then he would love her because Rachel was not able to have children at this time. And so at Genesis 30, she has a child. I didn't write down my verse numbers. I'm looking for it. She has a couple children, and it's the names of the children that she's saying here.
Zebulon.
Here it is. Actually, let's Genesis 29
Oh, okay.
and verse 33.
I see it.
So she says right before that, Leah conceived and bore a son and named him Reuben, for she said, because the Lord has looked on my affliction, surely now my husband will love me. And he didn't. So here's this 33. She conceived again and bore a son and said, because the Lord has Shema, that I am hated, God has given me this son also. And she named him, and this word, sometimes we say Simon or Simeon, but it's also, the name is also Shimon. So Shimon. So it's a play on words with Shema.
Oh.
And so the Hebrew text is doing a play with a word play on Shema right here. And she says, the Lord has Shema, that I am unloved. So in this instance, what does it mean that the Lord has Shema, that I am hated, and has given me this son?
Mine says heard, but it sounds more like no.
Or it could say heard. Heard is the translation of Shema.
Interesting.
So it's kind of God heard, like physically heard with ears. But then another part of this is that she felt heard as well. So there's a difference between being heard and being listened to.
Yeah.
And Shema has both of those things, to be heard and to be listened to and know that you are being listened to. But then this piece, God also responded and gave a son to her. And that is another part of Shema that is really important, is the actual response that is occurring. It is not Shema if there is not a response. You can listen to something, you can hear something, but if there's not an action in response to it, it's not Shema.
Does it have to be a positive action?
It's like the equivalent would be obey.
Okay.
There's actually no Hebrew word for obey. Shema is the word for obey. So to obey something, when you see the word obey in Hebrew, they're probably using Shema in the meaning hear, O God. So if we go back to the Shema prayer, we could also start it. It says, hear, O Israel. It could also say, obey, O Israel. Listen up, O Israel. showed me that you're listening by acting rightly, O Israel.
Mhm.
This would all be a part of Shema.
Hmm.
There are other words in Hebrew that also mean listen. And so we have kashab, which means like to give it your attention to or incline
How
your
do you
ear
spell
to.
that?
That would be Qashab.
Oh, never heard of that.
And as I'm spelling these, it's the English equivalent
Right.
of Hebrew. But if you looked
Hebrew
in
letters.
an interlinear Bible or you looked in a concordance, you would be able to find it usually by that spelling.
I'm looking at my Bible here and it has some, Simeon probably means one who hears.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Mine just says hearing.
And then one who hears, because it's playing off of Shema, is more than just to hear, but also to listen and obey. There's another word, azan, Azan, in Hebrew, that means to listen or to hear. And so Shema contains the word azah, but it means azan, but it means more than that. And then one other word that is used in Genesis 1:7, where it says God made creation, the word make, to do or to make, is azah. And that also overlaps with the meaning for Shema then. So those are kind of Hebrew words that, just like in English, we have words where if you were to make a mapping, you would see overlaps of to listen overlaps with to hear, to understand overlaps
Yeah.
with that, but they have alternate meanings
Is
beyond that
the,
too.
before I go here, is the prayer then called the Shema?
Yes.
Okay, because sometimes people pronounce it
Oh yeah.
a different way, Shema or something. Okay, but that's the name of the prayer and the first word.
The
The whole,
first
it's
word.
all Shema. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
See you later.
So then we have in Exodus chapter 19:5.
verse.
Verse 5.
Hmm?
Chapter 19, verse 5.
Mhm.
So this says in the NRSV, now therefore, if you obey my voice and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession out of all the peoples. Indeed, the whole earth is mine. This one in Hebrew, the word obey is actually two words. It is Shema Shema. It's said twice in Hebrew. It would be, now therefore, if you Shema Shema my voice and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession out of all the peoples. And it's in
Is that to hear
Hebrew.
and to understand?
So it's whenever you see two words right after the other in Hebrew, it's emphasizing that word. That is how in Hebrew grammar you would emphasize a word, you'd say it twice. And so this means like, not only does this mean obey, but it means really, really listen, obey, and really do what I'm talking about now. Like I mean it right this time. So we have this word that's already an incredibly strong word with so much meaning packed into it. And then in this context in Exodus, it's being emphasized even more so. Any questions on that? Our video for tonight is really short. So we're going to watch a short clip that's kind of going to put images to a lot of what we talked about.
Gretchen?
Yeah.
How much does this really strong obey, and have to do, and there are things you must do and show, change when you get to the New Testament and Jesus coming?
So Jesus, not much at all, because what Jesus
Okay.
says is, I didn't come to replace the law and prophets or to get
Okay,
rid of them.
yeah,
I came to strengthen them. And
but,
so
and he adds love to it, right?
Jesus makes it stronger. So in the Old Testament, there's things about Old Testament laws that say, like, if you can't do this, do these other things that are easier. And Jesus says, no, not only does like what your actions do, but your very thoughts matter. Which,
Okay.
and so all your very thoughts, not just your actions. Now, Jesus does like clarify where the hierarchy is as far as commandments and laws go. That at the very basis of it is to love the Lord your God with this we're talking about right now, with all your soul, all your heart, all your mind, to love the Lord your God. And the second is like it, to love your neighbor as yourself. Upon this hang all the law and the prophets. So Jesus gives a different way of thinking about it. But it's not so different that people wouldn't have understood what he was talking about. And Jesus would have been really familiar with this prayer as well. It was an important prayer at that time period. Other questions? So the full prayer is, I'm going to tell you what verses they're from. It's Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 4 through 9. And so the first part is Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 4 through 9. And then it continues with the verses from Deuteronomy chapter 11, verses 13 to 21. And then the prayer continues into Numbers chapter 15, verses 37 to 41. And this is going to be your homework for next week, is to read those 3 scriptures and read them more than once. Because whenever we read things more than once, we hear them differently. And maybe right before you read them, ask yourself a different question. Where's the mind and the body in this? What does to obey mean as I read this?
So what were the second 2 again?
So the second 2 again are Deuteronomy chapter 11, verses 13 through 21. And Numbers chapter 15. Verses 37 to 41. 15, 37 to 41. And there's a little opening that's a part of it too, that's not directly out of scripture as well. But we'll read these parts from scripture. Well, let's let the Bible Project, our video is 3 minutes long tonight. So let's let the Bible Project put it all together for us and clarify anything that I muddied.
For thousands of years, every morning and evening, Jewish people have prayed these well-known words as a way of expressing their devotion to God. They're called the Shema. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. And as for you, you shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and with all of your strength. Now the first word of the Shema is hear or listen, which in Hebrew is pronounced Shema. That's where the prayer gets its name. Now, Shema is a really common word in the Hebrew Bible, and it's obvious why. Hearing is a very universal activity. It's usually connected with the ear, as in Proverbs chapter 20, ears that shema and eyes that see, the Lord has made them both. Now that seems basic enough, but if you look at the other ways that Hebrew authors can use the word Shema, they use it to mean more than just let sound waves enter your ear. In Hebrew, Shema can also mean pay attention to or focus on. So when Leah, who wasn't loved by her husband Jacob, she has a son, and she names him Simon, or in Hebrew, Shim'on, because, she says, the Lord has sham'ad, that I am unloved. So Shema means to hear and to pay attention to, and even more. It can also mean responding to what you hear. This is why so many of the cries for help in the book of Psalms begin with a call that God listen. Psalm 27, verse 7. Shema my voice when I call, O Lord. Be merciful, answer me. So asking God to Shema is at the same time asking God to act, to do something. It's similar to when God asks people to listen. Like when the people of Israel come to Mount Sinai, God says, if you shema me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all the nations you will be my treasured possession. Now there's a couple interesting things about this verse in Exodus. In Hebrew, the word shema is repeated twice in this sentence to give it emphasis. If you shema, meaning listen closely. But also notice that from God's point of view, listening is basically the same as keeping the covenant. So when God asks the people to shema, what he means is that they listen and obey. And that's the last fascinating thing about Shema. In ancient Hebrew, there is no separate word for obey, meaning to carry out the wishes of someone who knows better than you or is in authority over you. So in the Bible, if you want to say, I will listen and do what you say, you use the single word, Shema. In Hebrew, listening and doing are two sides of the same coin. This is why later in Israel's history, when the people were breaking their covenant promises to God, the Hebrew prophets would say things like, they have ears, but they're not listening. The Israelites, of course, could hear just fine, but they weren't actually listening, or else they would act differently. And so in the end, listening in the Bible is about giving respect to the one speaking to you and doing what they say. Real listening takes effort and action, and that's the Hebrew word Shema. Hey guys, thanks for watching the Bible Project. We hope this video was helpful. It's part of a brand
So there we have it, all wrapped up. Any thoughts, questions, reflections?
I learned a lot.
Yeah.
Good. I thought you would
Very
like
dense.
this one, especially talking about the Mesopotamian medical texts.
Yeah,
Thought that would be
Interesting.
but I also like the whole thing about Shema. It's a whole new word. I can I understand a lot more about the Bible in listening to that than the part where you talk about move to the New Testament. I looked in there and I thought this now makes so much more sense.
Yeah. It's an incredibly important context. So when Jesus is saying, listen, even though he's not like it's being written in Greek, and so we don't have the word Shema behind it, the concept of Shema is behind it. And it's impossible to listen and not obey. They're connected.
Oh, great. Lots
Try
to
to
think
use-
about. Thank you.
Try to use the word Shema in your daily life. See where it
Yeah.
comes up.
Do that in the store and have somebody hear it and they'll think you're swearing
Oh, no.
or something bad.
You'll have to explain it to people.
Yeah,
who
then
use it, I'm sure.
they'll kind of shun you because they'll think you're crazy.
It's kind
Thanks
of
a
like
lot,
with
Gretchen.
a dog, when the dog really listens and obeys, like does both, that's kind of a Shema, I think.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you, everyone.
Yes,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank
Till
Very
next time.
interesting. Thank you.
Everybody stay